The good thing about this year's Global Media Forum is that we don't only have one keynote speech, but we actually have two. And the very first will be delivered by the EU Commissioner for Enlargement. So she's responsible for working very closely with the countries that want to join the EU. And of course, it also has to do with press freedom and with the work that we do at the media, because there are some conditions for joining the EU. And one of them is, of course, that you need to have a certain standard of press freedom in your country. So that is what the commissioner is looking at, among other things. Her name is Marta Kos. She is the commissioner. She's a seasoned diplomat. But before becoming a politician, she was actually a journalist, and she worked, among other places, right here at DW. So, welcome to the Global Media Forum. Welcome to DW, Marta Kos.
Thank you, Liz. Yes, indeed. I started my career, but in a very, very different times, without mobile phones and so on. But more about it later. So why is quality journalism essential for democracy? What are the challenges we face in our candidate countries today, and how can we protect democratic spaces and win the battle of narratives? Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be in Bonn. It's great to be back to Deutsche Welle. Yes, Deutsche Welle was my first entry point into international journalism almost 35 years ago. I arrived from a communist Yugoslavia in 1990 to work in the Slovenian Abteilung, Slowenische Abteilung der Deutschen Welle. Back then, we still traveled through a divided Europe, but the wind of change had already turned into a storm, and the Berlin Wall has just fallen a few months earlier. So Deutsche Welle, at that time it was still in Cologne, I reported on an emerging new geopolitical reality, the German reunification, the end of the Soviet Union the following year, and the hope that the unification of our entire continent would be the next step, could be felt everywhere. That these geopolitical changes took place in peace was not a given. It was, in my opinion, a miracle. And it was the work of millions of Europeans and of responsible statesmanship on all sides, of Kohl, of Gorbachev, of Reagan and Mitterrand. And not every part of Europe was blessed like this. The country of my youth, Yugoslavia, descended into a bloody war, fueled by the rhetoric of toxic leadership. This war has left resentment and distrust that are still felt today. And it created new borders, while all over Europe we were busy breaking them down. I learned a lesson back then. Leadership matters. That the dream of freedom and unity and the nightmare of the authoritarianism lead down very different roads. This lesson still motivates me today, and it has never been more relevant. Today we see again enormous geopolitical changes. The wind of change is blowing again, this time at a global scale. Once again, we stand at a fork in the road. Some want to lead us down a dark road. Some welcome the rising tide of authoritarianism. But we have the choice which road we take, and the road of freedom and unity has always served us best. We should remember the lessons from the past. They should be our compass. If we are united, Europe is strong. It is time to finish the project of European unification, because a larger, united European Union will strengthen our voice in the world. It will help reduce our dependencies. It will ensure that democracy, prosperity, and stability are strengthened across Europe. It is time to answer the call of those who made the free choice to join our union: Ukraine and Moldova, the Western Balkans, and hopefully also sometime Georgia. For me, the enlargement of 2004, when my country, Slovenia, and so many others joined, was one of the happiest moments in my life. It is the greatest geopolitical success of the EU. We stabilized all of Central Europe. By contrast, the failure to integrate the Western Balkans and the failure to paint a path for Ukraine and Moldova is one of our continent's saddest moments. We now need to finish the job under much more difficult circumstances. Why more difficult? Because today, unlike in any previous round of enlargement, we are faced with enemies of freedom who are spending enormous amounts of money to derail the process. They invest in polarizing societies, destabilizing democracies, and eroding trust. We see this everywhere, in the candidate countries, but of course also inside the EU. Russia has established factories of lies at an unprecedented scale and amplified by technology. The war of aggression against Ukraine did not start with tanks. It started with narratives to justify aggression. It started with polarizing societies, with painting democracies as weak, and with eroding trust in information, eroding trust in facts. And let's be clear, this is a fundamental threat to our societies today. In her Nobel Peace Prize lecture, the Filipino journalist Maria Ressa summed it up perfectly. Without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without trust, we have no shared reality, no democracy, and it becomes impossible to deal with our world's existential problems. This is why we need to fight back against those who poison our information environment and erode trust. This is why we need quality journalism. But the environment for quality journalism has never been more difficult. When 30 years ago I reported from Bonn, for later Slovenian as a correspondent for Slovenian radio and television, I used to go to press conferences only with my pen and notebook, of course no phones, and I had pockets full of 5 Deutsche Mark coins. Why? Because afterwards, after the press conferences, I had to run to a phone box and call Ljubljana to record my reports. And of course, the line was always long. Back then, we journalists were still the source of limited information. We had the time to check the facts. In short, journalists were still a filter. And this is no longer the case. Today, we face an abundance of information. We are confronted with social media algorithms that prioritize the outrageous over the thoughtful, and while lies are cheap, uncovering the truth is expensive. This forces us to rethink how we support quality journalism. First, we need to defend democratic spaces. This is essential to make your work possible. Our strongest tool is the enlargement process itself. Liz, you've been talking about this. We are working with candidate countries to make sure their legislative frameworks support free and independent journalism. Without real media freedom, no EU membership is possible. It is a part of the all-important fundamentals. Just one example. In Serbia, the recent adoption of 3 media laws was possible because it was an EU requirement. The selection of an independent regulatory authority for electronic media, REM, is another EU demand. We will be looking very closely at the implementation, but those are small steps in the right direction towards a democratic space where informed citizens can make independent choices. But media freedom alone is not enough. As I have said before, lies are cheap, the truth is expensive. My second point, media organizations need financial sustainability. This is something with which we have been helping for a long time, also together with Deutsche Welle. The Deutsche Welle Academy has for many years been a partner in our support programs for media freedom and pluralism in the Western Balkans. Thank you for this. However, with the demise of US aid, our work has become a lot more difficult in our partner countries. We are stepping in many places, but we cannot replace US financing everywhere. Radio Free Europe is the most prominent example. The European Union is providing some short-term support to keep the broadcaster running while we assess the next steps. Because the needs are high everywhere. We have recently stepped up support to Belarus to help sustain independent voices. In Georgia, we have reallocated funding from the government to civil society organizations and independent media. On top of that, we are also supporting the European Endowment for Democracy. The EED can move very fast. They are like a fire brigade, ready to react very quickly when independent journalists are in need. When earlier this year the US stopped supporting Ukraine's independent media, the EED stepped in with many emergency grants. One of them went to Realna Gazeta. They are a media outlet originally from Luhansk. They are known for investigations into life under occupation, and these are the voices we need to maintain. My third point, we also need to rethink how the EU communicates. Sometimes I ask myself, would the 25-year-old me, the young journalist here in Bonn, have understood the 60-year-old me, the commissioner? We don't always, I admit, make it easy for journalists. Yes, European politics can be complex, but behind every regulation, every initiative, there is always a reason why. And that is what we need to talk about, not just the procedures, but the purpose, the why. What does better infrastructure actually mean for people's life? What does EU support mean for education, for healthcare, for peace and stability? If we want to win the battle of narratives, we also need to tell our story better. How can we do that? Let me give you some example. Moldova will have elections in September, very important election. It may be a small country, but it is strategically located at Ukraine's southern border and has access to Black Sea. The unprecedented interference of Russia shows that the Kremlin looks at it that way. Moldova matters also for our security. I visited the country in May to sign a new investment plan, 1.9 billion euro. Traditionally, this would be a half-a-day visit. Sign the agreement, shake hands, leave. But I stayed for 3 days. I visited towns and villages from the very north to Gagauzia and down to the Danube Delta. I met more than 150 mayors, business leaders, farmers, young people, and also journalists. We gave space for a diversity of opinion to be heard. We traveled specifically to areas where EU skepticism runs highest, areas where every day anti-EU narratives are planted. Narratives like, you will lose your identity, EU aid will indebt your country for years. We can fight against those narratives. We have good stories to tell, even in regions where 95% voted against EU accession in last year's referendum. A mayor in the city of Cahul told me, my village would not exist anymore without the EU. You helped us build electricity and sewage system. Moldovans who work in the West often want to come back, but they would no longer find their village if it wasn't for the EU. What has Russia invested in the region? I asked the mayors. Nothing, of course. The only investment they make is corrupting politicians and vote-buying schemes, investments to stop the free choice of people. We need more of that, more of these actions. We should go to towns and villages, listen and build trust, and we must not leave the field to our adversaries. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we need to continue doing to protect quality journalism. Defend our democratic space, make sure the truth remains affordable, and communicate better, not just what we do, but why we do it. And if we get that right, I have no doubt we will once again say no to the dark road and choose the path of freedom and unity. And this is what Europe is about. It is about peace, freedom, prosperity, and security. So we should choose the right path, just as we did 35 years ago when I worked here in Bonn with my pockets full of 5 Deutsche Mark coins. I wish you a very successful forum.
Thank you so much.